I have got to make a shift where I'm not putting in 80, 90, 100-hour weeks to make the same amount of money. So I started investing into real estate more heavily at that time. What that ended up doing was balancing out my income to be a lot less seasonal, a lot less lumpy. I got amazing tax benefits. The appreciation from the assets was very beneficial at that time too. And frankly, I enjoyed it so much, I sold the companies and went all in on real estate.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Randy Dick on the Return on Life podcast. Like I say, always, it's not always about the ROI, but we do need an ROI to have an ROL as well. So it's about return on life, and I've got just a really fun guest. We're gonna just have so much fun. I know that already because we've been doing a little bit of an intro on our own. But I've got Nic DeAngelo here. He is got some roots in Detroit, but he lives just south of LA in Huntington Beach, which is just, if you've never been there, you got to go there. It's one of my favorite places. Love Huntington Beach. And we're going to be talking about investments and core values of what Nic does with his amazing company called Saint Investment. He's got, gosh, over $200 million in a portfolio, 20 states, 24 projects. It just goes on and on and on. And I love his nickname, by the way, Fixed Income Goat. I love that. Welcome here, Nic.
Randy, really great to be here. Yeah, like you said, been great catching up a little beforehand. I love the show, and I'm excited to jump into some fun stuff today.
Yeah. Hey, well, before we jump into the show, we're talking a little bit of hockey, and you were a Detroit Red Wing fan, but you're now what, a Duck fan? Is that what I hear?
I am. We've bet a lot. So I have a lot of family in Detroit. I love them dearly. And I was a Red Wings fan before there were the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, or now the Ducks of Anaheim. So I love both teams. We've bet a lot of steak dinners on who's going to win in the playoffs between the two. There's been a lot of good rivalries. So I'm a diehard, but my heart is split both directions, and I want both to win.
That's awesome. Fantastic. And you play the game as well.
I did 20 years of hockey, played in California. So it's a big state, a lot of competition. You just wouldn't think that, right? When the average
No.
temperatures in the 70s, you wouldn't think hockey be top of the list, but the sport's blown up in Southern California over the last couple decades. And man, I still love the sport. I still miss it. I got 3 boys under 5 years old, so I'm
Mm.
shoving them all at the sport, and I can't wait for them to be lacing up and getting out there regularly.
Oh man, you got a busy life. Being a hockey dad with 3 boys, can only imagine. Can only
Yeah.
imagine.
Oh
Hey,
yeah.
tell us a little bit about your company and what you do and how return on life fits into that.
I love the topic of your podcast because it hits very close to home. It was something that came out of soul searching on my end, really, kind of how Saint Investment came together. My earliest roots, my earliest family, just being around entrepreneurial mindsets and thought processes and having big questions asked of why you do certain things, why you invest time into certain things. And so I was blessed to have that wisdom from my dad, from uncles, from grandfathers, right? All that said is my big shift and my big question of, return on life, if you want to think about kind of that exact moment, that aha moment, was I was running multiple companies. I was making a lot of money, right? We were very successful, huge margins, gigantic team, lots of stress, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks, right? Most nights only sleeping maybe 4 or 5 hours max. Those were good nights, working 7 days a week, but making a lot of money, right? The issue was the company was lumpy. So we were making just hand over fist money, and then it wasn't as fruitful, and then hand over fist, and it was kind of seasonal in that regard. And what I realized was that I was going to lose my mind. That was number one. I was losing my health. That was clear. My relationships were out the window, right? So friends and family were pretty much, I was completely disconnected from. And even my romantic relationship, which was kind of one of the closest to me at that time, was completely on the rocks. And I analyzed my life top to bottom, and I said, I have got to make a shift where I'm not putting in 80, 90, 100-hour weeks to make the same amount of money. I need to shift. So I started investing into real estate more heavily at that time. What that ended up doing was balancing out my income to be a lot less seasonal, a lot less lumpy. I got amazing tax benefits. The appreciation from the assets was very beneficial at that time too. And frankly, I enjoyed it so much, I sold the companies and went all in on real estate. So
Wow.
that was the big shift at that time. Was it was such an aha moment that you could be somewhat more balanced in life. And again, when we're in deal season at Saint Investment Group, and when we're focusing on acquisitions and it's time to buy, and it's that timing, I'm still working big hours, right? But the difference is that's like a sprint instead of an ongoing marathon forever for the rest of my life. And that shift for me and understanding was really put real estate on a pedestal in my life in a big way. And we've been doing that ever since.
Hmm. You've just made me think of an incredible book called Shine by Gino Wickman. And I don't know if you've read that book. Have you read
I,
that
ha-
book?
I have not. I've read a huge amount of books. So I'm actually making a note because I'm a book geek. I gotta read good stuff that's recommended. So I'm making a note now.
Okay. Well, one of the things that Gino talks about is the true self, but the true self also plans out 10 years in advance. And the pace that you're on, there's probably no way that you could have lived another 10 years, like 100 hours a week. I thought I pulled some big hours in my time, but that's insane hours. And he just talks about, you know, thinking out 10 years and then reverse engineering the 10 years, which is really what you're doing with Saint Investment as well for the likes of your clients. Your
Absolutely.
so your clients, let's talk a little bit about your clients because I think this is
Sure.
really important because for the listener, like who is this for? And let's just dive into who you serve and help and the mindset of those people as well, because they are also, I'm sure, looking at return on investment, but also trying to create return on life.
Absolutely. So early on in X amount of years ago, we were focused on the standard syndication model, which for those not familiar is we raise money from investors on one side, we purchase a fixed address, fixed set of addresses in some cases, and we add, so it's one property typically, and we add value to that property over a period of time, let's say 5 years on average, and then we sell at the end. We split profits between the investors and ourselves who manage the deal. We're the sponsors, and then we go on to the next deal, right? So
Mhm.
we've done, about 20 something of those, about 24 of those, right? Very successful, very above average returns. We're very proud of those results. But you asked the right question, Randy, which is what's the return on life for our investors? So towards the end of those 24 deals, we started seeing something very interesting, and it was a shift massively in the mindsets from our investors. So if you asked us who our avatar is, if you will, and for marketing terms, or who our just average investor is in the real estate world, it would be someone between 2 and 40 million most commonly, right? Although we have investors that are worth hundreds and, probably half a billion, on our upper ends, but on average, 2 to 40 million net worth, right? Many of them are business owners or were business owners or moving to sell their businesses and be ex-business owners, is with the dream of many of them. So many of them are at that age range where they are phasing out of the workforce. They're selling their businesses or they're moving to retirement. And with that shift, what we saw was even though we could throw around amazing returns previously, our average IRR was 35.5% on deals.
Wow.
So something to be very proud of. That's not what they wanted. They didn't want a 5 to 7 year deal anymore, right?
Mm.
Because having a discussion with, let's say, a 75-year-old about a 5 to 7 year time horizon, that individual does not have the same interest as, say, a 45-year-old about a 5 to 7 year time horizon. So that's one. Two is the returns. While I used to brag about our 35.5%, and I still do today, I'm still very proud of that. That said, that's actually scarier for somebody towards the tail end of a career or in a retirement phase because they go, well, what risk is associated with that? And I can tell that individual we've never lost an investor money. We've never not returned capital. We've never paid late. I can tell them all that, but they understand at the core of the investment that we are there to boost returns as high as possible, right? That is the goal of a syndication. So that was no longer the interest of most of our investor base. So what we found was they were looking for dependability, stability, trust, conservatism, consistent cash flow. So, it's a kind of more of a joke and a kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, the fixed income goat, right? But the reality is we've shifted our model to go along with what our very sophisticated, very smart investors were looking for. So what we did instead was we said, we worked it all from backwards, and we said, what is the most rock solid asset class in the United States? Again, we're based in the US. What's the most rock solid asset class in the United States? And what we found was that single family mortgages in the United States have the most compelling case study for rock solid performance over the next 20 years. That's why we leaned into that. That's why we've been investing in single family mortgages and put together our Saint fixed income fund, right? It's called the Saint Income and Growth Fund, right? And so that fund pays great returns between 12 to 14% on the high end. And it gives our investors what they really have been asking for, which is a return that they could depend on month after month and the flexibility to get out in a reasonable time that's not 5, 7, 10 years later. So that with a rock solid asset base. So that's what we do today. That's what we're leaning into. What we found for the return on life, not just the return on investment, what we found is that produced the best results for our investors, where now instead of getting 4% on bank CDs, they could work with us that we already have a relationship with, we already have trust with, and they could get, triple or even more than what they'd be getting at the bank. It's real estate backed, so they're not stuck in the stock market. Many of them want to get away from that with how frothy and how turbulent things have been in recent years. And so the return on life for our investors, we've seen a huge increase by just doing what they're asking, right? Giving them what they want. And so that's been really rewarding for us as well. I myself haven't found anything better in the industry, for what I'm looking for. So I'm probably, 650,000 in our own fund, right? So I'm a big fan myself. So that's kind of like an update of where we're at today and a little bit of how we got there.
That's really interesting. The greatest gift that you have is sometimes the greatest curse, also to yourself, but others too. So you can brag. I love that you're bragging about our great IRR, but yet they didn't want that. They want safety, security, and really, really interesting what somebody's why is versus somebody else's why. And you put everybody kind of in the same spot, but they think so differently. And it's interesting. I do a lot of investment work as well, and I have a lot of investors that I've served over the 30 years I've been selling real estate. And it is funny how that shift happens. And it sometimes happens really, really quick in the investor's mindset, like something comes their way, a crucible moment or something. And it's just like, whoa, they just want to shift almost instantly. Is there something that you have seen that has caused people to all of a sudden want to shift what they're doing? Is it just a slow burn of time?
I think it's two things intersecting, right?
Okay.
So yes, there's an exact moment. There's an exact moment and there's an exact storm of things brewing, but it was two things intersecting. One is we, especially in the US, we're dealing with the most wealthy and largest generation of all time, the baby boomer generation, right? Time passes. None of us can stop that. The baby boomers are at the phase where they were getting close to retirement. They're starting to look around. Do we want to work for the rest of our lives? When do we want to retire if that's the case? And at the same time as a lot of those big questions were entering the minds of many baby boomers, we got hit with COVID, right? And COVID came with huge question marks. Things like, what does a country look like, or what does the Western world look like if it's shut down and businesses can't operate? Ooh, that's a big question, right? What's the Western world look like if we're printing more money than we've ever printed in the shortest period of time ever, which is unquestionably going to cause inflation at a huge level, right? What do the inflation numbers look like in the future? What do rates look like in the future? How does all this coalesce into a difficult decision for multiple generations, but especially for baby boomers as they're making that tough transition into retirement? So what would the exact moment be? I think it's all those factors hitting each other at once and that kind of crossroads of what that created, right? So on our side, to kind of give you some to paint the bigger picture, those are a lot of the discussions we have with investors. Is what's that look like? What's the thesis at Saint Investment Group for things like inflation? What do we bet on rates? What are we seeing in the market, right? And so, we give a lot of that away for free just to get out ahead of it and say, hey, it's all for free. We're doing the research anyway. Check out what we're doing, right? But that's to answer the question. It's that intersection of those two. And in the post-COVID world, we're in a completely different place. Top to bottom, different economy, different structure. In the US, there's all this talk about what happens to the US dollar, what happens to inflation, the Federal Reserve, political questions. And so all that coming together created such a huge sense of unsteadiness, especially for a generation moving into retirement where their income's not going to be what it once was. So conservatism we've seen has financial conservatism. I won't talk about politics. I'm not qualified on that topic, but financial conservatism has come to the forefront of most of our investors' minds, making sure they have long-term thinking, that they can cover them the rest of their lives, that their income's locked in with investments and assets that are rock solid for a long period.
There's such a shift. Thank you for making that so easy to understand, so clear. You do such a good job of that. I've just found that so many have gone from offense to defense, which is what you just shared. Like, let's get more, let's get more, let's get more. And now they're actually pulling back and saying, no, conservatively, I just want to pull back and I want to make it really, really safe. Things that are really at the forefront of everything right now, and there's some things that you shared with me earlier, which is the greatest wealth transfer coming up. Like it's happening already with the baby boomers and so forth, that huge, huge wealth transfer. What do you see in your clients? Are they afraid of that transfer to whoever it is, or are they excited about the transfer?
So we've spent huge amounts of time researching this because we have our study of one, right? We're one company and we have all our investors and we have these discussions, but we're in a unique position to have this ongoing discussion with a select group of people, kind of what I mentioned earlier with that net worth range and age range. And then there's the broader discussion across the economy. So I'll give you both of what we're seeing and what we've researched. The greatest transfer of wealth, in essence, that's happening right now is the baby boomer generation, the largest generation, like we talked about, and the most wealthy passing away. And what happens to that huge chunk of wealth being sprinkled throughout the next generations, the following generations? There's two schools of thought. And by the way, the number 72 trillion today. Okay. 72 trillion that will be entering the system over the next 20 years. So that is a huge change in the economic landscape, particularly in the US. That's just a US based number, right? So a lot of our data is US based. That said, there's two schools of thought on how the baby boomers will spend their money. One is, and this is less common, this isn't the conversation we have as much. One school of thought on how baby boomers will spend their money is, I'm not sitting and coach for my kids to sit in first class. Okay. That's the mindset. It's spend it if you got it, but time it so that you never have to worry the rest of your life. So enjoy the money. You worked hard your whole life. Enjoy it, right? So that contingent of the baby boomer generation, and I have no moral qualms with either one, right? For me, I know which camp I fit in. I have more of a legacy play. I want my kids to, do certain things and be involved in certain things. But I have friends that are very wealthy, very successful. They're saying, I earned the money. I want to spend it. My kids can figure it out for themselves. And, they need to shoulder that. And I think that's very fair. That contingent that wants to spend their net worth, which is a big portion of the 72 trillion, will be driving consumerism and be driving the consumer numbers significantly. They'll be driving the economy with trillions of dollars without regard for how they're going to save it and what they're going to do more than beyond a 20-year window or so. So they're going to be spending a lot. That's a huge driver of the economy on the consumer side. That's widely a good thing, that that's just not all being concentrated in certain areas. Now, the other half of that contingent is a bigger group that we speak with. So at Saint, a lot of our discussions are legacy plays, our beneficiary documents, for instance, when someone passes away, who inherits the investment, how does that work? I mean, it's like freaking 14 pages because it has to cover all these new considerations all the time. So we work with that group much more intensely. And the thought is from that generation is that, hey, I worked my whole life. I want my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids in many cases to have opportunities and put that money to good use. So with our income fund and our model, that works really well with that mindset, right? Others that want to spend it all, we're saying, hey, God bless, keep that economy rolling, baby, right? But those that want a more multi-generational play, we're providing fixed income, right? We're trying to give them that product, that tool of their portfolio, where they know that if they put a certain amount of money, they're going to get a certain result, and that whether it's their generation, their kids' generation, et cetera, basic needs are met. Their kids can make decisions and live their lives in a way where maybe some of that financial strain is off the books or less of a concern. And certainly for the crowd that's in the retirement age, they know that their bills are covered if they reach a certain amount of investment. So those are the two contingents we see. We work almost exclusively with more of a legacy play, a long-term thinking mindset, but there's a huge cohort of that 72 trillion of net worth that's being passed down that will be driving consumerism also.
That's a bit of a concern to me. I mean, I love the legacy play because legacy builds things, which, we need to build our countries to be substantial and stronger and be able to handle things. And we need to let the people that are coming behind have opportunity. And if we're just going ahead and spending it on whatever, it's great for now, but we're going to have a deficit with the quality of people and the life if that's the way we move forward. And the other thing is that we're all going to live a lot longer. We're all living longer and longer, and healthcare and aging and all that. Man, we're just going to need more money. So this is where investing is so important, to have that continuous, consistent, long-term passive income to sustain us as we age. So really, really important stuff there. The other question is taxation. I mean, we're broke. The governments, the countries, they're all broke, and they can only get the money from how? One source, that's taxation. And that is a bit of a scarier thought too. How are you helping your clients with taxation?
That's a fantastic question. So I have the same concern, right? And real estate historically has been this massive, massive, massive tax shelter and tax
Mhm.
strategy, right? To remove tax drag that so many people, especially the high net worth or the high earners, experience. So on our side, we can only check so many boxes at one time, candidly, just to shoot 100% straight with you. We have to choose the boxes that we check. On the syndication side, right? So 5, 7, 10 years of an investment, choosing a single address, a single asset, there's a huge tax advantages to that. There's huge tax strategies to that, right? But, there's downsides. 5 to 10 years of your money locked up, maybe higher risk, for many of these assets. You really have to dig into certain fundamentals of a certain address, a certain market. So we're on the other side of that. We don't have the same tax advantages as others, but we have things like a higher fixed income that they can expect. So it's a balance of that. So what we often do when we get that question with investors, we still want them to have the tax advantages. We work all the time with other syndicators that we say, hey, look, we invest or co-invest or partner on deals all the time with other operators. We're the fixed income guys, not really the tax efficiency guys. We're the fixed income guys that are going to have a lot of flexibility and a lot of high income or high return on that. But the tax side is kind of a different beast. And because we invest primarily in mortgages, there's not that built-in tax shelter like you have with properties in this case. So we have a few places that we connect people. I personally invest with, like quote unquote competitors, right? It's more like coopetition rather than competition in real estate. But I invest with competitors all the time for the same reason, to get tax benefits. So we don't have that component built in. Between you and I, we have some game plans probably in the next 18 months or so to be offering that to our investors. But right now, we're just really focused on being the best fixed income product in the market that's based on real estate.
Great. So with that in mind, things are always evolving, changing. Inflation is one of those things that has really been pressing a lot of decision making and so forth. Is there another concept, another avenue, another vehicle that you think will supersede what you're doing today, which is in mortgage, investing in mortgages? Is there something that you foresee coming that could be even better?
Oof, good question. So, how you want me to give you my top three?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, because we spent a lot of time on this data. So, this is a question we're extremely organized for.
Hmm.
So the question being, if we weren't going to choose mortgages, what would we choose? What do we see as another rising star long-term investment? So I'll give you my top three.
Okay.
Still, mortgages, absolutely without question, are my favorite investment vehicle today. I think they're the best all around. I think they're the most stable, most predictable. Really, the government protects a huge amount of mortgages, especially in the US. It has its kind of like arm around the mortgage industry because they don't want to see a 2008 crisis all over again.
Hmm.
So I am so partial and so biased to the mortgage industry. Number two, though, number two is industrial real estate. Okay. For a few factors. One is I think it's the best growth opportunity that we're going to see in the next decade. Okay. Let me give the reasons for that because it's more nuanced, it's more large scale, it's more geopolitical.
Hmm.
China has a lot of issues, and I've had entire webinars that we've done on this. So I won't drill down on I won't spend too much time on a 2 hour webinar topic, but let's just say this. Inflation has affected them too, especially wage inflation, right? I believe the most recent statistic is that wages have increased 15x since the year 2000 in China.
Hmm.
So they were a country that was built on the fact that they have a massive population of low wage labor, right? So they did two things. They solved it two different ways. One is they said, how do we use this in a beneficial way? They put those individuals in factories. They sold the world cheap goods en masse, huge product, huge benefit to the geopolitical structure at that time. The other side is they had the one child policy. Those two things cannot coexist. Speed that up 40, 50 years. Their population has reduced massively and their labor cost has gone up dramatically. Now, especially in the US, we are leaning on Mexico. That
Hmm.
really kind of looks like the future of US manufacturing. I'm positive that our neighbors to the north, the amazing Canadians, have a lot of that impact as well because Mexico, frankly, today is net about 2 to 3x cheaper than China. Also, we don't have to wait, right? We're all the North Americans, right? It's you ship up, you ship down, but most of that's rail or car or truck, right? That's not shipping container 60 to 90 days. So I bet industrial for those reasons is because industrial, whether it's located in the southern US, the northern Mexican border, etc., you now take shipments on boat out of the equation. The timing is so condensed. You get to use North American technology, which is about, I think the last number is about 3 to 4 times more efficient in just in different practices and technology, etc. All in all, industrial, especially warehousing, third-party logistics, last mile logistics, concrete tilt up, right? 32, 34-foot ceiling heights, about 50 to 150,000 square feet. I think that's the second biggest opportunity and the best growth opportunity. Third, multifamily, without question. Just because governments it's such a supported asset class by governments, right? We have cost of living. I know cost of living is crushing Canadians also,
Yeah.
right? You guys have tough cost of living in multiple cities. That's up there with even the highest on the U.S. side. So governments, banks, national banks, are all supporting multifamily with great rates, great support. I mean, not great rates. There's no such thing as great rates right now, but often better rates with often better terms and often better opportunities. Also, I think population growth is steady in the West in the North American world more so than other parts of the world. So it's not like a reduction in um, population like many parts of the world, like Europe is seeing. So I think multifamily would absolutely be number three as the best asset classes. Between those top three, that's what we're looking at almost exclusively.
Love it. You nailed it. From my perspective, you absolutely nailed it. Mortgages and the industrial piece, like you said, last mile, it's the new retail. You know,
Absolutely. We
warehousing is
gobbled
the
it
new
up, right?
retail. Absolutely. And multifamily, of course, we're creating a world of tenants, not a world of property owners anymore. And that's just where it's at. And then, of course, the mortgages really work well into multifamily, where private mortgage money can really build that up and bring up the mezzanine financing and so forth. Gonna say a statement, and I'm interested to see how you respond to it. Calcification of government. And what I mean by calcification of government is it's almost like governments are in cardiac arrest and the arteries are being plugged. Every government at every level seems to have bottlenecks that just can't get stuff done. And it's just the age of government and its calcification of all of their resources, their tools, their lanes of getting stuff done is just about at a standstill, it seems like. And I bring up this question because I interviewed somebody out of Spain where the government was incorporated or new institution of government in 1978. And he was saying how easy it is to do business in Spain. And I said, well, why is that? He says, well, it's the lack of calcification in
Mm.
the system. Um, I'm up here in Canada. I'm just blown away. I can buy a piece of incredible dirt that's already zoned, ready to go. And by the time I've actually built something and brought it to market and have an end user, and it's often 3 to 5 years later. It just blows my mind. And then yet we struggle with supply. We don't have enough supply, which is causing prices to, skyrocket, which is hurting the affordability and nobody can buy and they have to rent. And so it's just this really horrible cycle of things. Are you seeing that in your part of your business?
Unquestionably. So, um, so I'll give you a comparative story, a comparable story. Okay. We we've operated 24 deals in 6 asset classes and have done development projects. We've done entitlement projects. We've done massive utility overhauls. We've done environmental cleanups. We were really, I made my bones buying significantly below market. So what you just described as like a massive headache, that's how I made my early bones in my real estate career. So I will not do that anymore. Just to be clear, I won't do it anymore. And because the last reason was to get an electrical upgrade on a property, it cost us 700,000 US, one, and two, it took us 5 years. Okay, the property was standing. Okay, it was standing. We already owned it. It was all set up. The entitlements were already in place. So that's just to get an electrical improvement. Okay, granted, it was a pretty massive electrical improvement, but it wasn't, we weren't powering a city block. We weren't master planning a community. It was for one industrial property. Okay. Now, to give you another example, is entitlements have become political to a degree that is beyond reason in the US, especially. And so, what I've seen is that just in the exact way, 3 to 4 years, you can buy it, it's ready to go. And by the time you fight the good fight, it's 3 to 4 years later, right? I've seen a project where, frankly, we were being muscled around by a excuse me, we were being muscled around by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They wanted to essentially extort this property from us for a discounted rate. Okay. We said, no, thank you. That's not how we want to do this. We want to develop this. So the political game got so complex that we ended up in this multi-layered, multifaceted standoff between the city, the state, the county, and a multi-billion-dollar corporation in a way that took us about the time exactly that you stated, Randy. Okay. Just to get to a point where entitlements were done. Right. So I just said the layers of complexity here are beyond what I can like the return on investment, the return on life, because the headache of this was beyond what I was willing to put in. Also, I'm like, look, I could do 3 or 5 or 10 deals in other areas by the same amount of effort and energy and returns that I'd be spending on one, right? It was not juicy enough for me to spend that time and effort and focus on. So there are parts of our country in the US where state and local ordinances and state and local governments speed things through. I happen to live in a place called California, which is not known for that. Okay. It's very much known to be the opposite of that. So I won't do that anymore. Okay. For all the reasons that you just said. Now, as far as calcification of government, there's a lot of reasons in the US we see that. But as far as over drilling down on the business sector, which is the most important to what we're talking about, I think it's that my personal belief is that if you give governments a lack of incentive to be efficient, aka another way to put that would be if governments aren't held to account for how badly they do their government business, then what you get is bad results. So on my team at Saint Investment Group, I pull up the KPIs, key performance indicators of every single person. We walk through them weekly. It's charts, it's graphs, it's numbers. It's very hard to argue that this number is not right, right? It's like, well, we pulled it directly from here. You supplied the link to get that number. So what about this is incorrect, right? Here's your chart. And so everybody knows how everybody did. That's not how it goes in government. When I was in retail, God forbid, it was a very complex time with retail and office and government leasing that we were doing. It was very, very complex. What we saw was government agencies would lease space from us at the clip of 2 to 5 to 10,000 square feet of office at a time, of retail office at a time. And what that would look like is they would build it out in a Ferrari build out, the nicest furnishings, the nicest this, the nicest that. I would go 5 years and see 0 people going through that office, not a single one. And so I'd call the person that I did the lease with and I'd say, what happened here? Okay. I have no business object. I have nothing. I don't know anything about what you're doing. When I see this build out, nobody even walks inside. Why is that? And she told me point blank, she said, look, Nick, to shoot straight with you, if we don't use our budget, we lose it. Right. So we got that office and we furnished that office because we had to spend that money. Otherwise, it would be removed from our budget in the future. We might have needed that office. It turned out we didn't. We decided to do these things, other things, blah, 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 blah. Nobody wanted to drive to this new It was like the most minor excuses to spend probably $5 million on nonsense. And if you expand that across, a continent or a country with 350 million people in the US, the amount of waste is staggering. So I don't think we have a good accountability system for government right now. Like, again, in my company, we're all staring at the charts. We're all staring at the graphs. There's accountability is very transparent. I don't think government has that. And I don't think that they want to have that. So I think it's only going to get worse before we find a system to do that.
Wow, that was well shared. Where's the US dollar going?
So the US dollar, let's see, I even have my,
That's,
here we go. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. It's
yeah.
over there. There you go. I got my US dollar. That was the first dollar I ever made, by the way,
Okay.
on the entrepreneurial side. So very proud of that. But the US dollar has been in the news a lot lately as far as are we losing the US dollar? Is Saudi Arabia going to go on, the yen or renminbi or even euro or whatever? The fact of the matter is, the US dollar, we're far off the gold standard. We're very far off the gold standard these days. And so that gives a lot of people a lot of heartburn. The truth is, and the fact of the matter is, I believe we're on the brass standard. Okay. So when you go to the shooting range in the US and you're exercising your Second Amendment rights and shooting your guns, at the end of the day, all those little cartridges are brass on the ground, right? And so the US has more brass than anywhere else in the world. I think the US military backs up the US dollar a pretty high degree. And I frankly, whereas we used to be so worried about being involved in every region of the world and bases everywhere and covering and managing it, I just don't think the US cares as much. If you look at like the last 5-6 presidencies, geopolitically, we've tried to be less and less and less involved. Biden is even trying to be less involved than Trump, at least before all the wars broke out on his watch, right? So all that to be said, I think it's massively blown out of proportion. And I think that the reality is the US dollar, that used to be such a gold standard for the US, I think it's a benefit to most of the world. If you get off the US, if you get off the US dollar as the currency of most of these small countries, What you have is inflation that goes through the roof, that goes crazy. You have a completely unmanaged financial system because it's based on a local currency that can be so muscled by others. You look at George Soros, for instance. George Soros turned multiple countries' entire financial systems on their heads by just being a hedge fund and navigating and betting against them and shorting or going long on different things to create those environments. The US dollar, I believe, worldwide has approaching, what is it, 30 something trillion in circulation throughout the world. Just in the US alone, we have 19 trillion in circulation. No other currency can even get close to that. So the biggest question I always ask is, what else could replace that? I mean, you could go with Chinese currency and see what that is. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, doesn't even want that at this point. It's not controllable. They can't manage it, right? Next is the euro. God bless our European allies and cousins and friends. But the reality is the euro is not going to be that. They have their own issues, across the board in the euro. A BRICS currency, I mean, come on, right? If you think those countries are going to band together and come to some, agreement on that, it's just not going to be happening anytime soon. So I think the US dollar's here to stay. And I think even if it declines slightly over a period of time, I don't think the US really cares at a high level, candidly.
Hmm. Okay, hey, let's get into some speed round here. Let's finish it off with
Yeah.
speed round. This has been fantastic, Nic. So insightful. Love it, love it. Okay, so speed round. Fine dining, takeout, home cooked meal, Uber Eats. What is it?
Normally, historically, I would have done fine dining just because I, work my tail off. I really, really love those moments just to enjoy like a really nice steak, a really nice wine, a really nice meal. I'm going to go home cooking now. Okay. I'm going to go home cooking. I got 3 kids under 5. I love my partner. I want to see her as much as possible. And getting those moments are really the most valuable thing to me at this point. So I'm an Italian, I'm from a big Italian family. So, the kitchen's a very big part of our house. And if I can cook a meal with my kids, with my lady, have fun, listen to music, it's what we were doing last night. That's my number one choice for that category, for sure.
Love it, love it. What do you do to let your hair down? And you can't say hockey.
Oh man, I wish it was hockey. I'll tell you that. I wish I was lacing up more. But yeah, I'm focused these days. I'm focused these days. So the 2 things I do, most importantly for myself, my own hobbies, I power lift. I try to lift really heavy things up and set them back down without hurting myself. And then I try to fight. So I get out there and I do a lot of jujitsu. As far as games go, I geek out on chess. I just think it's such a complex, ultimate, one-on-one player versus player type game. But the most fun I have is going to be seeing new things, doing new things. I like experiencing, learning, and doing all that. Right now, it's a lot of time with the kids, and then the other health stuff and game stuff I'm into.
Nice. Favorite band or favorite song?
Ooh, My Way by Frank Sinatra. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Wasn't expecting that. Nice. I love it.
I know probably every word to every Frank Sinatra song. So
Wow.
a weird dorky.
That's that Detroit.
It's exactly what it is, by the way. That's yeah.
Do you prefer text, talk, telephone, or in person?
Um, I prefer in person. The
Okay.
higher the more important it is, the more in person I like it. So it's either in person or text for me.
Okay.
Text, 98% of things can get done, but if it's important, I want to see someone eye to eye.
Okay. I know you like to read books. Audible or hardcover?
Okay. Audible. Audible today because I can get more books in. The volume of information that because I always want to be learning at a high pace. My library looks like yours. I have a huge amount of books and a huge collection, but I just can't read in the volume that I want to do or return to books as quickly. So I'm on Audible nonstop these days.
Awesome. Last question, bit of a trick question. If you were a scratch and sniff sticker and I rubbed your shoulder, what would I smell?
Such a good question. All right. I'm gonna go with like the wine answer. You ready? Like I'm gonna really make it stick. I'd say a rich blend of leather and old books and mahogany and maybe a little scent of vanilla and spice in there, like
Oh,
black pepper, you know? I want something complex, you know what I mean? Like a good scent in there, something along those mix.
from what region?
Oh, oh. I don't know. You know, I'm not a big wino. I'm more of a, you know, whiskey these days. But if I was gonna drink some good wine lately, it's been French. Been
Mm,
learning a little bit about that. I just kind of take the advice of people who know more than me, and they've seemed to been on French wine. So I've been drinking French wines lately.
fantastic. Great answer, Nick. Nick, thank you for being a great guest, a fabulous guest, and really diving deep into all things investing when it comes to the side of real estate, whether it be mortgages, whatever it is. It just was really good. Thank you so much for being a great guest, Nick.
Randy, I had a blast. I've had a great time catching up with you here, and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Okay, take care.